Welcome, everybody, to this episode of O365Eh. In tonight's episode, we're going to walk you through troubleshooting Teams call quality issues with the call quality dashboards and data in Power BI. So we're basically going to spend the next 15 minutes to get you up and running with Microsoft Power BI to connect to pull down, and to analyze the Teams call quality data right in Power BI, and show you some pre-built reports that are available to download. So this is why this matters, and it's really good, is if you're proactively trying to identify call quality issues before they happen, you can use these reports and that data to do it. And also, if you have some custom reporting needs around call quality, bringing it to Power BI really meets those needs. So Habib, do you want to give us a little more introduction and details around the prerequisites?
Yeah, thanks, Kurt. So yeah, these reports are, as Kurt mentioned, like really detailed information around your call quality usage, devices, et cetera, device types, et cetera. And the guys will go through some of this information. And you can take those existing reports and you can customize them, and they'll walk through that as well. But this isn't like a high level type of reporting, right? That these reports provide. Obviously, you can build higher level ones that come out of the box, or use the out of the box ones, which are in the Teams Admin Center reports, which are usage type reports. You can use the M365 usage and analytics workspace, which is a great Power BI tool and dashboard to utilize to see what is happening within your organization around usage and utilization. And then there's a Teams personal activity Power BI report that you can get to by adding, the Power BI app inside of Teams to show that kind of information. So again, it's a bit more detailed with regards to the call quality data that we're going to be looking at. You do need to have Power BI desktop. You can use the web version after the fact, but in order to get the templates and information populated, it's got to be on Power BI desktop. You also need to download the CQD templates, and we'll provide a link for all this information as well. So from a licensing perspective, you can utilize Power BI free, but that only means you can publish that to your own workspace. If you want other individuals within your organization to utilize or view that data, then you'll need a Power BI Pro license, and they'll need a Power BI free license in order to consume that. And then if you want anonymous people to be able to see this that don't have a Power BI license, then you would need a Power BI premium license in order to utilize that, which is a dedicated type of infrastructure for Power BI. And then just from an administrative point of view, the permissions that you require are CQD administrator permissions. Obviously, if you have the Teams administrator, you'll be able to get that as well. But if you want to go more granular, it's just the CQD admin. So I'm going to pass it back over to you, Kurt, to walk us through getting this environment set up.
All right. Thanks, Habib. So as Habib mentioned, what you'll want to do, the first thing is to go download those CQD Power BI query templates, and they're published by Microsoft. We'll put the link in the associated blog post. So I have it up here. There's one download link that will download a zip file. So after you have that downloaded, you'll want to extract that zip file. And what you'll see is you'll have 7 Power BI query templates. So for those not familiar with Power BI, it's like a Word template. You can load them in Power BI, load the data, and then save them as a Power BI report, which would be the associated .pbix file. So you have 7 of those. You have a couple of Word doc files, which mimic what's published on the websites. And you also have this file here. It's called Microsoft Call Quality.pqx. That's a query template file. And what that will do, it's an important one. Part of this process is you'll need to install a custom Power BI CQD connector. And what that does in Power BI, that'll enable you to reach out and connect to the CQD data in the cloud for your tenant. So that file will actually install the Power BI connector. And that may sound scary installing a connector. It's not. It's quite an easy process. And that's actually the next step you'll want to do is to install this connector. All we have to do is to create a directory. And this is in the documentation, by the way. So if you don't have this directory, it's in your documents folder. You create a Power BI desktop custom connectors folder. You copy that call quality dot PQX file into this folder. And what that will do is when you start Power BI desktop and you go get data from online services, it'll look for the files in here for any custom connectors. So in this case, I've copied the file into this directory. We'll start Power BI desktop. And just a note, if you're not familiar with Power BI Desktop, it's a fantastic tool, extremely powerful. There's actually two versions of it. There's one in the Windows Store and a desktop version. They both work. I find the Windows Store version is a little more up to date, and frankly, I've had less bugs with it, so I recommend that version. So when you start Power BI Desktop, one of the first things I would do personally is, like a lot of desktop applications today, you can sign in the desktop application to a cloud service. That's how Power BI works. That's how it works with the Power BI service in the cloud. So up in the right-hand corner here, you can sign in if you haven't already. So sign in with the credentials that you use for the call quality data, and that will avoid having to enter more credentials in other steps. So once you've done that, one of the first things we do in Power BI before we do anything report related is we get data. And that's in the upper left-hand ribbon here. We go get data. For the call quality data that we're going to connect to, the data source will be a Microsoft online service. So these are all the different types of data sources that Power BI supports. We'll go to online services. And I'll warn you, this isn't alphabetical, so you gotta just scroll through and pick it out. But the one you want for this exercise is the Microsoft Call Quality Beta. And if you don't see it in the list, you probably haven't put that query connector file in the right directory. So just be sure you do that and it should show up. So once we connect to this custom connector, it'll try to establish a connection to the call quality data for your tenant in the cloud. And it should prompt you for credentials. I've gone through this process once, so I've entered the credentials. What this has done is reached out and actually started to download that data model. We have the ability to actually transform the data, but we're using a direct query connection right now. So we're just going to load that data model. And it's worth pointing out, Power BI, there's two big data connection models. You can see it here. One is to import the data model and all the associated data. The other is a direct query connection model where anything we do in the reports actually directly queries the data source. And that's the only one supported for this call quality data. So we'll select direct query, hit connect. So it'll take half a minute to load the data model in its entirety. And it's important to note right now that it's actually not loading the data, it's loading the data model, which if you're not familiar in Power BI, the data model represents all the fields, all the relationships. So for the call quality data set, the data model is quite extensive. And also, if you're not familiar with Power BI, there's sort of three big panes. You'll see them in the left-hand side here. The visualizations, those are the components that you'll use to build reports. The filters pane, once it expands, that's what you use you can drop specific data points on there, and you can actually set filters. The most common one, of course, would be like a date filter, or in this case, if you're interested in call quality reports for a certain set of users, you could select those users in that filter. And then the most important pane is the fields on the right-hand side. So you can see this data model's finished loading. We have one data source. It's called query one. They could have named it something a little more inventive, but this allows us to actually see the data model in the call quality data set. So you can see there's a plethora of data fields. And whenever you see a data field with this icon, the summation icon, that's actually a calculated field. That means it's doing something like a count or an average. And I point that out because an important limitation when you build reports with the call quality data is any visualization requires a measure, a counted value. I don't know why, but it's a limitation pointed out in the documentation. So if you have a table of like call quality, data, you'll actually need to include a measured value there for it to work.
Yeah, and Kurt, the direct query connector that you mentioned to get this data does have some limitations, right? And so some of those limitations are not all calculated columns function. So the ones that are here are fair game, but if you're trying to create your own, that might not work. As you mentioned, we're querying the data live, so there's no references to cache data that you're able to kind of use on your report. So you are going to be pulling the data each time you create your report. And as you mentioned with the data filtering, I don't believe the data is stored in a datetime object. So you have to kind of work around that limitation as well. So there is some nuances about using the direct query connector within Power BI, and that happens to be the query connector that this data is using to access it.
Yeah, really good points, Michael. And I was just looking at this as I set it up before this episode, and most Power BI reports, how it works, you have a timestamp field. As you said, I didn't really see that. There's a year and a week. So what you can do, you can use the slicer visualization in Power BI to use that as a filter. Or include that in your tables or in your graphs. If you do want to get started to build reports, right now we don't have any data, it's just loaded the data model, but if you're familiar with Power BI and you're familiar with this data set, you can literally start right away doing things like, a table is a very common visualization to show data in your data set. You can plop one of those on, and you can literally just start dragging fields over to create your reports. Now, one of the challenges you'll have is the data model's not documented. So what I suggest you do is those 7 pre-built Power BI query templates. Those are really well-developed reports. And when you click on the visualizations, it'll show which data fields are included in those visualizations. So that's the best way to learn what the specific data points are. And I'll quickly show that. So this, you could start building a report right away, save it as a PBIX, and there's your report. And once you have that built, you can publish it to the Power BI service, and then you can share it. What we'll do here is, just to save time, I've gone in and loaded one of those query files that was shipped with the CQD templates. So I've loaded the team's usage report, that template, and now that customer custom connector is installed, when that query template loads, it'll fill with data because it's able to go out and pull that data, and then you can save it as a PBIX file. So that's what I've done here, test team's usage report, and you can see it's actually populated the data model now with data in my tenant. There's not a lot of data here. Back to what I was saying in terms of learning what the data fields are. If I, for example, want to look how this monthly call count by media type was built, I can click on it, and you can see here, this is a line in a stacked column chart. And then below, these are the fields that were used to build that visualization. So on the x-axis, we have the month and the year. And then on the y-axis, which of course is the vertical axis, we have the audio call count, the video call count, and the screen share count. And what that's giving me is a nice representation month by month, year over year, of the number of audio calls, video calls, and screen shares. So you can see how powerful this is. I can start modifying this report and customizing it to do whatever. I can overlay some call quality data on top of these statistics, for example. So once that's saved locally, as this is, you can publish it to the Power BI service. As Habib mentioned, in terms of Power BI licensing, if you have the free version of Power BI, which is included in like E1 or E3, you can publish to your own workspace in Power BI. But you do need a Power BI Pro license to publish in another workspace, which if you're sharing these reports in an organization, they might have a dedicated workspace for that. And to share the reports outside your workspace, you need a Power BI Pro license. So in this case, I'm just going to publish it to my workspace, my personal Power BI workspace.
There's also something to note with the direct query connector. You can't publish to the Power BI online service in GCC tenants. So it's always supported for the commercial tenants to do this extra step of publishing it into Power BI Online. But unfortunately, if you're a GCC customer, you can't use that.
Good note. If you're not familiar with the Power BI service, it's very easy. Just go to powerbi.microsoft.com, sign in, and you'll be taken to your Power BI online service. So in this case, I have a few workspaces. This is my workspace right here. I just published this Teams usage report. So now it's available online. And this is a very powerful model. Now that the report's online, I can share it with people in my organization. I can even edit it online. It's a really good model for sharing and collaborating. People can comment in the right-hand comment about these reports and collaborate. And you can even download and install. There's a Power BI app for Microsoft Teams that'll put it in the left-hand rail. You can consume this report right in Microsoft Teams. So you can see the same report that I had in my Power BI desktop is now available directly in the Power BI service. And one thing to note, if I go back to the Power BI desktop and look at this report, it looks like this report has many more pages, and it does. If you're not familiar with Power BI, this little icon here shows that this report page is hidden. And it's actually available in the Power BI service. The reason it's hidden here is these are drill-through reports. Drill-through reports mean that you right-click in a report, like on a user or on a peer-to-peer call, and that report, in this case, the minutes total summary, is a drill-through report on a specific conference call. So you can see that in the Power BI service. If I choose a call, for example, drill through, and that report is a hidden report in Power BI desktop, but available in the Power BI service. So I say that to encourage you, these CQD reports, there's a lot of really, really good information, and it uses that drill through model. So if you're seeing something that's interesting, right click on it and see what drill through reports are available on that data set. So as I said, not a lot of really compelling data in my test tenant here. So I'll pass it over to Dino now to walk us through some of the reports he's found really useful in his practice.
Yeah, thanks, Kurt. So I've gone ahead and published a bunch of reports, all of them actually, all 8 of the templates that Microsoft provides, and I put them in a workspace called CQD Power BI Reports. And I'm just going to talk about a couple of them, just so you can get an idea of the type of data that you can see. And you can see here, I'm going to focus in on the first report, which is the CQD summary report. And this one is a nice one to use. It's just because it's going to give you a bird's eye view of a lot of different type of data. And you can see within each report, the summary report, there's like 8 or 9 different pages here of different types of data. And I'm going to focus just on overall call quality here. And the common theme you're going to see is just trending. And when you're looking at data, you want to look at trends. And the yellow always represents kind of bad call quality. So you want to make sure that you're trending downward or kind of even across all your reports. So I like this report because it shows you a map. It shows you where calls are coming in from. In this case, when you see server to client, server always means the team's service and the client is the actual team's client. So you can look at conference calls, peer-to-peer calls over the past 180 days and get a nice little view there. So a good report to dive into. I'm not going to touch on all of these, but you can see that you can get into things like you can zero in just on P2P quality or just conference reliability. And so then these dashboards expand and give you a bit more data. If you don't like the time range or anything, you can set it over here on the right. You can just change your filters and make adjustments that way. Next up is the CQD summary report. Same CQD summary report, but conference quality. I thought I'd show this. So here's an example of drilling into the summary of conferences. So you can see it was a volume of 60 calls in the past 30 days in this tenant. Again, there's that trending call quality bar to show you if stuff's trending up or down. So it's relatively flat. Stuff's pretty normal in this tenant. So here's an example of that drill down. I'm shifting gears to a whole other report. I'll go into the CQD location enhanced report. And this one starts to take into consideration a little bit more detail about the location of where the call came in. So what I like about this is you can start zeroing in on like the top performing buildings and worst buildings and meeting rooms. And
yeah, the location report is it's critical that organizations prep that information. So in the call quality dashboard, you do have to go through the tenant data upload, which is a CSV file of your subnets and your building information that will overlay this information so that you can say, hey, is it wired inside? What building? Is it wireless? Is it external people? So that's a critical piece for these reports that actually have value is, is it networks that you manage and maintain? Is it people external? And then having that split of information.
Yeah, I think, I think also it'll help with the building out of your roaming profile policies, right? So that when you're doing sort of the hybrid work and figuring out how to deploy that, then you'll understand sort of how your networks are configured and or what's needed in them.
Great. So, again, you don't have to do this, but uploading that building data file, lets you look at actual meaningful data in terms of the building names versus just IP addresses, which to the average person in an organization aren't going to know which subnet corresponds with which location. When uploading that building data file, I would say also make sure you get all your VPN subnets in there as well, because then you can quickly run, build reports that look at stuff to do with VPN. So I've just chosen this Wi-Fi quality report here, only in so much as that I find it useful for my customers. I don't, here at the bottom, you can see it breaks down calls based on the band that they're on, 2.4 or 5. I don't run any 2.4 in this tenant, so that's why the count is 0. But often for clients, that are running dual environments, 2.4 and 5, you'll see more worse calls in the 2.4 range, because one of the recommendations is to try to get all your clients on 5 gigahertz. So I like this report because it always helps me prove to customers that you need to do this, because just saying it is one thing, but showing them the actual physical data that shows that you'll on average get more poor call quality on 2.4 gigahertz networks, then they can't really dispute that. So it helps you make your case.
Yeah, and there was actually someone from Microsoft posted on Tech Community a way of, this is great. The building upload file is great for, the networks that you manage, and if your users are in the office. But if your users are remote, there was a blog post, and we'll reference that as well, where you can use like a GeoIP and IP API, and then it will overlay against all your user data to see where in the world your users are. So if those users are external to your office locations, then you can actually use these quality reports to see, if my users are joining in from Europe, are they having poor quality? If my users are joining from North America. So it's interesting to see that take as well.
Yeah, for sure.
And Dino, just to clarify, like that report you're looking at, that's the CQD summary report that's shipped in those templates, right?
We're still in the CQD location enhanced report, so that's its own report, and then we're under Wi-Fi quality page. So,
Okay.
So there was the summary reports, which we were looking at first, and this is called the CQD location enhanced report, which is at the top. So, yeah, anything that
I see. Now that I look, I see that location enhanced in the
right
download.
in the title. So all of these reports, landing, the meeting rooms, wired quality, all will focus in on the location enhanced data that you have. So it's just, as the name indicates, the reports kind of favor the location information. So it's going to skew all the reports toward where the possibly poor call quality might be coming from.
One of the powerful things with Power BI is the filtering, and I've noticed, Dino, on many of the reports you've shown here. If you look on the right-hand side, there's a filter for the second network connection,
Right.
wired or Wi-Fi. So I think if you hit that drop down, you're actually able to toggle that, and you can select wired or Wi-Fi, which will give you a whole new view of the report.
Yeah, you can. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
that's cool.
One of the other views you get is by mobile, and that takes me into my next report, which is the mobile device report. Again, this is its own report, CQD mobile device report. I don't have a lot of data. I've only got 2 users that run mobile in this tenant, but given that a lot more organizations are relying on their mobile workforce, I use the Teams mobile client a lot. This report may become more relevant, right? So a large part of your community might be relying on the mobile client. So they've dedicated a whole dashboard just to the mobile device, and you can come in here and see things like, I'm on the landing page, but there's quality, reliability, and then RMC. Anytime you see RMC, that's rate my call. So a lot of these reports have a rate my call sub dashboard that shows you how users rated the call after a meeting. For example, you're always presented with that. How was the call quality? And you have that 5-star rating that you can rate the call at. So, so there's a few examples of the different reports published. I'm also a big fan of publishing these directly or consuming them within Teams. So for a lot of my customers, I'll just use the Power BI app in Teams, and then you can reference your workspace. You don't get as much real estate because you're in the Teams client, but I find that the reports get consumed because they're in Teams, and that's where most people spend all their time. So with that, I think I'm passing it over to Michael to talk a little bit more about report customization.
Yeah, I think we covered a lot of it. I think we're well over our time. One thing I do want to call out is in that download of the Power BI templates, there is a new addition to that grouping, and that's the QER, the Quality of Experience report. So this was a separate set of Power BI reports that were hosted on GitHub. I think Matt Wade from Microsoft created these. Those have now made their way into that template file. I didn't see it in Kurt's download. It says download might be a month or so outdated. But when you download it, there'll be a separate zip file in that parent zip that will have the QER. So a lot of great reports in there. So lots of ways to slice and dice the data and get up and running.
Yeah, that's great. And hybrid work is still a big thing. We have people returning to the office, but people still working from home. So I think loading those locations in will give you visibility into where the problems are, where the quality issues are. So that's really important. All right, good episode. Really important subject. Making sure teams call quality functions well, because we all know how frustrating bad call quality is. So hope that reporting is useful, and we'll catch you on the next episode. Thanks.
Thanks.